Bearer of my promise, there is something I have been holding in my hands, turning over and over with great care, waiting for exactly the right moment to place it before you. Not because I was uncertain about giving it, not because I had any doubts about your readiness or your worth or your ability to receive what I have prepared. I was waiting because a gift of this magnitude, a word of this weight and significance, deserves to arrive at precisely the right point in the story I am writing for your life. And that moment is now. Not yesterday, not some point further down the road. Now. As you listen to these words, as they find their way from your ears into the deeper parts of you where words either stay or pass through, I am with you in this moment, fully present, fully attentive, fully intentional about everything I am about to say. What I am about to speak into you is not a formula or a script or a collection of pleasant religious sentiments. It is a conversation I have wanted to have with you for a long time, one I have been preparing for with the same intentionality and precision I bring to everything I do. So let your mind go quiet for a moment. Let the noise of everything you have been managing, the concerns, the calculations, the rehearsals of what might go wrong or what you should have done differently, let all of that step back from center stage for a little while. Because what I want to do in this moment is speak to the part of you that those things have been crowding out, the part that remembers why it started believing in the first place, the part that holds on to hope even when hope feels expensive, the part of you that, underneath all the fatigue and uncertainty, still leans toward me. I see that part of you, and it is that part I am speaking to right now. You've been watching your life as though you were reading a book and could only see one page at a time. You look at the words in front of you, and some of them are difficult words, words that you did not expect to read, words that feel like they belong to a different kind of story than the one you thought you were in. You turn the page and find more uncertainty, more questions that do not yet have answers, more circumstances that do not yet match the vision you have been carrying. You turn another page and the pattern of difficulty seems to continue, and somewhere in the reading, a thought begins to take shape in the back of your mind. Maybe this story is not going where it was supposed to go. Maybe the author has lost the thread. Maybe what began with such clear intention and beauty has somehow unraveled. I want you to stop right there, in that thought, and let me speak directly into it. The author has not lost the thread. The author never loses the thread. Every word on every page of your life is exactly where I placed it, chosen with awareness of the complete arc of the story I am telling. Every difficult word, every hard paragraph, every chapter that seemed to go longer than it needed to, or in a direction that made no sense from where you stood, all of it is part of a narrative that I have been composing from before the first word was written. And the story I am writing through your life is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever composed. Not because your life has been without struggle, precisely because it has not been without struggle. And the story I am telling is one that has room for real struggle and real grace and real transformation and a real testimony that cannot be explained away. Here is something you need to understand about the experience of reading a book while you are inside the story. You do not see the arc. You cannot. The person standing in chapter 14 cannot see how chapter 7 and chapter 19 and chapter 23 are all working together toward a resolution in chapter 30. The person living in the current chapter only has access to the current chapter. They can look back at what has already happened, and with enough reflection they can begin to see patterns and purposes in the past chapters. But the chapters ahead are not yet readable from where they stand. And so the current chapter must be interpreted without the clarity that the finished story would provide. That is not a flaw in the experience. It is part of what it means to live inside a story that is still being written. But it is also the source of the greatest misreading that happens in the lives of my children. They look at the current chapter, without the context of the chapters that follow, and they decide whether the story is good or bad based on an incomplete reading. Do not do that. Please. I am asking you with all the warmth and firmness of a father who has seen the full story and cannot stand to watch his child despair over a chapter that is essential to the ending. Do not decide whether your story is good or bad from inside chapter 14. You do not have enough information yet. The chapters that will make everything make sense are still being written, and they are coming. They are, in fact, closer than you think. But they cannot arrive before the groundwork laid in the current chapter has done what the current chapter is designed to do. What does it mean that I am the author of your story? It means more than many people allow themselves to receive, because the implications are enormous. If I am the author, then nothing in your story entered without my knowledge. Nothing surprised me. Nothing arrived in your life that I had not already incorporated into the larger plan. Now, hear me carefully here, because I know this can be misunderstood. I am not saying that I authored every painful thing that has happened to you, that I designed suffering for suffering's sake, that I delight in difficulty. I am saying that I am skilled enough, sovereign enough, loving enough, that even the things that were not part of my original design for you, the things that entered through brokenness, or through the fallen nature of the world, or through choices that were made in pain or confusion, even those things I take into my hands and work with. Nothing that enters your story is beyond my ability to incorporate into a narrative that ultimately serves your good and reflects my glory. When a skilled author includes a genuinely difficult chapter in a story, it is not because the story has gone wrong. A skilled author includes difficulty because that chapter is doing something essential. It is developing a character in ways that only pressure can develop. It is establishing stakes that make the eventual resolution feel real and earned rather than hollow and cheap. It is creating the kind of emotional depth in the reader that makes the story transformative rather than merely entertaining. And that is what I am doing in the difficult chapters of your life. I am developing something in you that cannot be developed any other way. I am creating depth in your character that will sustain everything I'm about to place in your hands. I am building a testimony that will not be a shallow, easily dismissible one, but a testimony with real weight, real history, real evidence of my faithfulness in the face of genuine challenges. Some of what you have carried in this season has been genuinely heavy. Please hear me say that plainly, without qualification. I am not minimizing the weight of what you have walked through or suggesting that you should not have felt its heaviness. The difficulty was real. The cost of it was real. There have been situations in this season that brought you to your knees in a way that was not entirely voluntary, where the weight of circumstances simply became too much to carry standing up, and you found yourself on the ground, and in that position you had to make a choice about whether you would reach up toward me or curl inward away from everyone and everything. I saw those moments, every single one of them, not from a distance, from right beside you. There have been prayers in this season that felt like they were going nowhere, like the words were dissolving before they could reach me, like you were speaking into a silence that had no warmth in it, no responsiveness, no indication that anyone was on the other side of the conversation. Those experiences of prayerful uncertainty are some of the most painful experiences a person can have, because they touch the deepest thing, the relationship itself. If the communication seems broken, how do you sustain the relationship? Let me answer that question directly. The communication was never broken. The silence you experienced was not my absence. I hear every prayer the moment it is formed, even before it reaches words. The thoughts that were too raw to articulate, the wordless aching that preceded actual prayer, the tears that were prayers in themselves when language failed entirely. I received all of it, every bit of it, and I have been responding to all of it in ways that the current chapter makes difficult to see, but that future chapters will make unmistakably clear. There have been moments in this season when you stood at the edge of giving up on something you had believed for a long time. Not necessarily giving up on me entirely, but giving up on the specific thing you had been trusting me for. The particular prayer that had been on your lips for what felt like an unreasonably long time. In those moments when the discouragement was acute and the gap between your expectation and your experience felt unbridgeable, something held you. Something kept you from letting go entirely. I want you to know what that was. That was not your own strength, though your faithfulness has been real and I honor it. That was my hand, holding you in place when you were too exhausted to hold yourself. That was the part of me that lives inside you, that persistent witness to truth and hope that does not capitulate even when everything else wants to. I kept you. I kept you through every moment when keeping yourself felt impossible. and I am still keeping you now. Here's the first truth I want to anchor in your spirit, the bedrock beneath everything else I am going to say. The story is not broken. Let me say that again, slowly, so it can travel from the surface of your hearing into the places where things actually live or die in a person. The story is not broken. The story was never broken. Every chapter I wrote, including the ones that felt most broken from inside them, was written with the full awareness of the author who holds the entire narrative. Every chapter was written with intention. Every chapter was written with love. Every chapter was written with knowledge of where we were going that exceeded anything you could have mapped from where you stood inside it. And the story is still being written. The pen has never stopped moving. The author has never stepped away, never lost interest, never decided that the story had become too complicated to continue. I leaned in closer when it got complicated. I paid more careful attention, because the most complex and beautiful parts of any story require the most skillful handling, and your story is receiving exactly that. So before we go any further, before I tell you what is ahead and what is already in motion, I need you to receive this as the foundation, not as a pleasant idea that you will try to believe if the circumstances cooperate, as an actual truth about your actual story, as certain as the fact that you are hearing these words right now. The author is here. The author is working. The author has never lost the thread, and the ending already exists in my knowledge, already written in the fullness of my intention for you, and it is not a disappointing ending. It is not a mediocre ending. It is not the ending of someone who tried hard and mostly failed. It is the ending of someone whose life, when its full arc is seen, unmistakably reflects the glory and faithfulness of the God who wrote it. That is your ending, and we are walking toward it together. Now let me tell you something more specific about what this means for the situation you are in right now, because I know that beautiful theological truths, while they are true and they matter, sometimes float above the particular, concrete, specific ache of what a person is actually living. So let me come down from the altitude of the larger story and sit with you in the specifics of what you have been carrying. You have had days in this season when the weight of unanswered questions was so heavy that it changed how you moved through the day. Not dramatically, maybe not even visibly to the people around you, but internally, something was heavier. The energy it cost to function normally was higher than it should have been, because beneath every ordinary task, there was the constant low hum of the unresolved. The uncertainty that would not stay in one corner of your mind but kept spreading into everything else. The prayer that had been on your lips so long it had become almost automatic, and you wondered sometimes whether you were saying it from genuine faith or from a habit you could not break, because breaking it felt like admitting defeat. I want to speak to that particular weight right now. The weight of the long-running prayer, the long-carried hope, the long-sustained expectation that has not yet been met. This is not a small thing. It is one of the most demanding things I ask of my children, to continue bringing before me, with genuine faith, something they have brought before me many times before, when the track record of responses is not yet what they hoped it would be. That takes a particular kind of courage. Not the courage of the single dramatic moment, but the quieter, more grinding courage of daily recommitment to believing in the face of delay. And I have watched you exercise that courage. I have watched you recommit again and again to bringing the same hope before me, to choosing trust on days when trust felt like the least rational option available. That recommitment, as small as it may have felt to you in the doing of it, has been a profound act of faith that I have not missed. Every act of faith, no matter how small it feels to the person making it, is significant in the economy of my kingdom. The prayer you offered on an ordinary Tuesday when you were tired and the words felt flat. The choice to hope again on a Wednesday afternoon when the news you received was discouraging. The decision to come back to me on a Thursday evening when you would have been justified in pulling away. Every one of those small, unglamorous, unremarkable-looking acts of faith was real. Every one of them landed somewhere. Every one of them was an offering I received with genuine appreciation, because I am not moved by grand gestures from people who have nothing at risk. I am moved by faithful, costly daily choices to trust me, even when trust is expensive. Those choices are part of what the current chapter is building. They are building in you a quality of genuine trust, not borrowed or theoretical, but personally tested and proven. That will be the foundation of everything I'm about to add to your life. Because what I am bringing into your story next requires someone who has been through the waiting and come out with trust that is deeper rather than shallower for it. Someone who has held on in the hard chapters and arrived on the other side with a faith that has a history. Someone who can testify from personal experience and not just theological conviction that I am faithful in the long chapters as well as the short ones, in the silent seasons as well as the loud ones, in the uncertain stretches as well as the clear ones. That is who you are becoming through this process. That is the person who is taking shape through every page of the chapter you are in right now. And that person, the one with the tested trust and the proven faithfulness and the deep roots that could not have grown any other way, that is the person I am about to walk into the next chapter of your story. The chapter that is being prepared for that person specifically. Not the easier version of you that might have existed without this season. The deeper, more rooted, more genuinely trusting version that this season has been creating. The story is not broken, it is building towards something that already has your name on it. Toward a conclusion that I have already seen and already called glorious. And the author who holds the full narrative is right here with you, in this moment, as committed as ever to walking every remaining page of your story with you, all the way to the magnificent ending that has always been the intention. My faithfulness toward you is not something that fluctuates with your circumstances. Let me make that clear from the beginning of this part of our conversation, because everything I am about to say rests on that foundation. My faithfulness is not a performance I put on when things are going well for you, and then quietly withdraw when the season grows hard. My faithfulness is not contingent on your understanding of what I am doing. My faithfulness is not conditional on you feeling it or perceiving it or being able to name it in the moment. My faithfulness is an expression of my nature, and my nature does not change. What does not change cannot be taken away. What cannot be taken away is permanent, and my faithfulness to you is permanent. There are seasons when my faithfulness is easy to see. The prayer was answered and the timing was clear, and you looked at the outcome and you said, without having to work very hard at it, that I am a faithful God. The provision arrived when it was needed. The relationship was restored. The health turned a corner. The door opened. In those seasons, seeing my faithfulness is almost effortless. The evidence is visible, and the connection is obvious. But then there are seasons like the one you have been navigating, where the provision is slower than you expected, where the doors are not yet opening, where the answers are still in transit, and the silence is sometimes so complete that it is hard to hold on to the conviction that I am working. In those seasons, something in you has to make a choice, a genuine, costly, daily choice, to believe in my faithfulness without the support of visible evidence. That choice, the one you have been making over and over through this season, is not a small thing. It is one of the most significant acts of trust in all of the spiritual life. And I want you to know that I have been watching you make it. I have seen the days when it cost you everything to choose trust again. I have seen the moments when the choice felt irrational, when the part of you that calculates probabilities and measures evidence was saying that the numbers do not support continued hope. And I have seen you choose hope anyway, not because you had figured out the math, because you had decided to trust the mathematician. That is real faith. That is the faith that moves me deeply. Now let me tell you what has been happening while you have been waiting, not as a retrospective explanation to soften the disappointment, but as an invitation to see what has actually been occurring in your life during this season that has felt so quiet and so slow. When I say I have been working, I am not using that as a vague spiritual comfort phrase that has no content. I mean specifically, concretely, in real and identifiable ways. I have been engaged in the preparation of what is coming toward you. Let me describe some of what that preparation has looked like. Think about the construction of a great structure. A cathedral perhaps, or a bridge, or a complex building that requires months or years of work before anything visible rises above the ground. The work that happens during those months of preparation is the most critical work of the entire project. The foundation must be dug deep and wide. The ground must be assessed and prepared. The materials must be sourced and tested for integrity. The engineering must be reviewed and reviewed again, because what is built on a flawed foundation will not stand. And none of this preparatory work is visible to the person who walks past the site every day. They see a hole in the ground. They see activity that seems, from their limited vantage point, to be producing very little. But the builder knows exactly what is being accomplished. The builder knows that what appears to be slow is actually the most important phase of the whole project, because without it, nothing else can be safely built. That is what I have been doing in this season of your life. The foundation being laid for what is ahead is deeper and more solid than anything that could have been constructed without time and care. The preparation happening in and around you is more thorough than any preparation that comes from a shorter process. And yes, from where you have been standing, it has sometimes looked like not much is happening, like the ground has simply been disturbed and the outcome is unclear and the timeline is uncertain. But from where I stand, I can see everything that is being established, every beam of the foundation, every element of the structure that is taking shape beneath the surface. And what I see is extraordinary. Let me go deeper into what specifically has been constructed, because I think you need to hear this in concrete terms rather than general ones. What has been built in you through this process, not around you but in you, is the kind of character that can sustain what I am about to place in your hands. That matters more than most people realize. The breakthrough that arrives before the character to steward it is formed can become a burden rather than a blessing. The door that opens before the person has developed the capacity to walk through it well leads to a room they are not yet ready to inhabit. This is why I am precise about timing, why I will not rush the preparation even when I hear the urgency in your prayers. Not because your urgency does not matter to me, but because I love you too much to send you into the next chapter before you are ready to fully receive and steward what that chapter holds. What specific qualities have been forming in you through this season? Genuine patience, first. Not the patience that is simply the absence of alternatives. Not the patience of someone who is waiting because they have no other option, but the kind of patience that chooses to continue trusting and continuing to walk in the direction it was going, even when the destination remains out of sight. That quality of patience, which is really a form of sustained trust in action, is one of the most valuable things a person can possess. It cannot be shortcutted into existence. It has to be developed through real seasons of real waiting, and you have been developing it through exactly that kind of season. Discernment has also been forming, the ability to distinguish between what is true and what merely sounds true, between what is from me and what is noise that mimics my voice, between the path that leads where you need to go and the path that looks similar but diverges at some critical juncture. Discernment, the real kind, not the shallow kind that relies on quick impressions, grows through seasons of having to make decisions without clear signals, of having to navigate uncertainty with insufficient information, of having to choose what to hold on to and what to release when you could not see clearly. That process, uncomfortable as it has been sharpening your discernment into something finely calibrated. Compassion is another thing that is deepened, because when you have been in the place of needing, you understand at a cellular level what it means to be in that place. When you have experienced the particular loneliness of a season that most people around you cannot fully understand, you become someone who can sit with others in their unexplainable seasons with a quality of presence that people who have only known ease simply cannot offer. The difficulty you have walked through is being transformed into an asset of the heart, into a capacity for connection and empathy that will make you an instrument of real comfort in the lives of others going forward. Nothing I allow to pass through your life is wasted, including the things that were hardest to carry. There is also a thing being built in you that I would call settled security. Not the kind of security that depends on circumstances being favorable, the kind that knows, at a level deeper than feelings and independent of what is happening externally, that you belong to me and I belong to you, and nothing can undo that. The security that does not need every question answered, because it is not actually standing on the answers to its questions. It is standing on who I am. That kind of security, the kind that cannot be rattled because it is not resting on anything rattleable, is the most durable foundation a person can have. And it is being built in you right now. Through every experience of having to hold on without the support of visible confirmation, you have been developing a stability in me that will not be shaken by what the seasons ahead hold. Along the path you have been walking, there have been moments that I placed there deliberately, not by accident, but with specific intention, to make sure you would not lose your footing entirely. Moments of unexpected clarity. Moments where something shifted in the atmosphere and the heaviness lifted just enough to let you breathe. Moments where a word came to you through a person or a passage or a quiet impression that was unmistakably from me, that spoke directly to what you were carrying with a precision that coincidence could not explain. Moments of provision that arrived from unexpected directions. Moments of connection with people who carried exactly the encouragement you needed at exactly the right time. I want you to think about those moments right now. Let them come back to you, not as distant memories, but as fresh evidence of who I am toward you. The times when you were in the middle of something genuinely hard and something broke through the hard. The times when you were at the end of your resources and something arrived to replenish what you had spent. The times when you needed to know you were not forgotten and something happened that made it impossible to doubt, at least for that moment, that you were seen and known and cared for. Every one of those moments was me. Not luck, not coincidence, not the random kindness of an indifferent universe. Me. Specifically and intentionally placing markers on your path that said, in the clearest language I could use in that moment, keep going, you are not alone, this road goes somewhere, and I am with you on it. Let me talk about the question of timing in more depth, because this is often where the deepest confusion lives. You have been waiting for things longer than you expected. Some of what you have been trusting me for has not yet arrived, and the absence has been costly. And in the absence, the question that keeps returning is not always, will it happen, but rather, why is it taking so long? That question deserves a real answer, not a deflection or a spiritual platitude that sounds comforting, but offers nothing concrete. My timing is not arbitrary. When I do not deliver an answer to your prayer on the schedule you anticipated, it is not because I am indifferent to your need or disorganized in my management of it, or because I forgot. My timing is always purposeful. There are things that need to be in position before the answer can arrive and produce its full intended effect. Some of those things are in the outer circumstances of your life. Pieces that need to move into alignment before the thing you are waiting for can land where it is meant to land and do what it is meant to do. Some of those things are in other people whose cooperation or whose presence is part of the answer's delivery. And some of those things, and this is perhaps the most important, are in you. There are ways you need to grow, capacities that need to develop, areas where the inner work needs to be further along before the outer answer arrives, and you are genuinely ready to receive and steward it well. Think about rain on a field that has been dry for a long time. When rain finally comes to dry, hard ground, it cannot soak in properly. It runs off the surface, taking away topsoil, filling gullies, but not penetrating into the depths where the roots would drink from it. The same rain, falling on ground that has been carefully prepared, broken up, tilled, made ready, absorbs fully, reaches the roots, nourishes at the deepest level, produces a different quality of growth than the rain that fell on unprepared ground. The rain I am sending toward you is the same. My intention is for it to penetrate fully, to reach the deepest roots, to produce the fullest possible harvest. And for that to happen, the ground needs to be ready. The preparation you have been in is not the delay of your blessing. It is the preparation of your soil to receive your blessing in the fullest possible way. What does this mean for how you navigate the days ahead, the days between now and the moment when the answers become visible? It means those days are not empty days. They are not days on which nothing significant is happening while you wait for something significant to happen. Those days are part of the process itself. The tending you do in those days, the choices you make, the faithfulness you bring to what is already in your hands, the quality of your inner life during the waiting. All of it is part of what determines the quality of what is coming. Tend the soil well. Not because you can control the timing of the rain, but because a well-tended field, when the rain does come, produces a harvest that reflects the quality of the care that preceded it. There is something I want to say about the specific area of your life where the waiting has been longest and the silence is felt most acute. That area is not outside my attention. The particular thing you have been holding before me for the longest time, the thing that has become so much a part of your prayer life that it almost feels strange to imagine a season without it. That thing is known to me in detail. Every dimension of the need, every layer of the longing, every reason why it matters to you, and how your life and the lives of those you love would be different when it arrives. I hold all of that, and I am moving in response to all of it. The answer is not standing still. It is in motion. The distance between where it is and where you are has been closing. The preparation for its arrival has been thorough and deliberate. And what comes when it arrives will reflect the depth of the preparation that preceded it. Hold on, bearer of my promise. Not with a white-knuckled grip that costs you all your peace, but with the quiet, settled confidence of someone who knows who they belong to. You belong to a God who does not abandon his children in the middle of their stories. You belong to a God who keeps his promises, not eventually, not barely but fully, and in ways that exceed what was hoped for. You belong to a God who has been working in this season with as much intention and love as in the easiest and most clearly fruitful seasons of your journey. The work has been real. The preparation has been real. And what is coming as a result of what has been prepared is more real than anything you can currently see or feel or touch. The journey continues, and I am in it with you, in the waiting and in the arriving, in the preparation and in the harvest, in every single step of the road between where you are now and the destination I have already prepared and already called magnificent. Let me stay a little longer in what I have been building in you through this process, because I think there is more to say about it than I have said, and I think you need to hear it in more detail than I have given it. The tendency in difficult seasons is to focus almost entirely on what is not yet resolved, on the gap between where things are and where you wish they were, and to let that gap occupy so much of the mental and emotional landscape that the things that are actually forming and developing and growing strong go largely unnoticed. So let me name some of what has been happening that the focus on the gap may have kept you from fully seeing. Your prayer life has changed in this season. Not in a way that could be described as straightforwardly positive, because seasons of difficulty often produce a kind of prayer that is rawer and less polished, and sometimes more desperate than the prayers that come in easier times. But rawer is not worse. The prayers you have been offering in this season, the ones that were less eloquent and more honest, the ones that dropped the performance and simply brought what was actually there, those prayers have been among the most real prayers of your spiritual journey. And real prayers, prayers that come from the actual interior of a person, rather than from a practiced form that the interior has learned to wear. Those prayers are what I am most deeply responsive to. Not because eloquence is not appreciated, but because a person who prays from their actual experience of their actual life is a person who has decided that honesty with me is safer than pretending. And that decision, that courage to be actually honest with me, rather than presenting what you think I want to hear, is one of the markers of spiritual maturity that this season has been developing in you. Your understanding of grace has also deepened. Grace is a concept that many people understand intellectually long before they understand it experientially. You can know the definition of grace, can accurately describe what it means, can even teach it to others, without having received it at the level of real personal experience. But there are seasons, like the one you have been in, where you come to the end of your own performance, where you cannot make the situation better by trying harder, or believing more correctly, or praying more fervently, or doing more of whatever it is you have been doing, and in that place of ended performance, you discover something. You discover that the thing you are standing on is not your performance. It was never your performance. The thing you are standing on is my faithfulness, entirely independent of your performance, and discovering that at the level of direct experience, rather than intellectual understanding, changes everything. Because now you know in your bones that the security of your relationship with me does not depend on you. And that is a freedom that people who have always been successful at managing their spiritual performance have a very hard time accessing. This season gave you access to it. And that access is one of the most valuable gifts you could receive. Something has also been quietly forming in your relationship to what I would call the ordinary sacred. Before a difficult season, people tend to experience the sacred primarily in the dramatic moments. The big answer to prayer, the powerful encounter in worship, the clear and unmistakable sense of my presence in a specific significant moment. Those are real, and they matter. But there is another kind of sacred that is equally real, and in the long run, more sustaining. The sacred in the ordinary. The sense of my presence not only in the extraordinary moments, but in the texture of daily life, in the morning that comes faithfully, in the food that nourishes the body, in the connection of a single honest conversation with someone you trust, in the unexpected moment of beauty that arrives in the middle of an otherwise unremarkable day. People who have been in difficult seasons long enough tend to develop a heightened awareness of the ordinary sacred, because the dramatic often becomes less frequent, and you have to learn to find me in the quiet places, or stop finding me at all. And that discipline of finding me in the quiet places, in the ordinary moments, in the daily evidence of my care in ways that require attention rather than announcement, that discipline is a kind of spiritual formation that produces a depth of lived relationship with me that many people never access. You have been learning to find me in the quiet places, and that learning is changing you. Not just for this season, but for every season that follows. Because the person who can find me in the quiet moments, who knows how to be aware of my presence in the ordinary, carries a quality of spiritual richness into everything they do. Their life has a different texture. Their awareness of the sacred has a different breadth. And the encounters they have with me, even in the dramatic moments when those arrive, are received with a depth of recognition that would not be possible without the training of the quiet seasons. I also want to speak about what has been forming in the area of your capacity for community. Seasons of difficulty, handled well, have a particular effect on how a person relates to others who are in difficulty. Before a significant difficult season, empathy can be real but somewhat theoretical. You can genuinely care about someone who is suffering without having the kind of knowledge that comes from having navigated something comparable. But after a season of genuine difficulty, of having been in the place of need and uncertainty and the particular vulnerability that comes from not knowing how things are going to resolve, something shifts in how you are able to be with others who are in similar places. You can sit with them differently. You can be present in their uncertainty without needing to rush past it to the resolution. You can offer the kind of company that does not try to fix or explain, but simply remains. That quality of presence, the kind that comes from having been in the dark place and knowing what it means to have someone stay with you there, is one of the most profound gifts a person can offer to another person. And this season has been building it in you. Your story, including the difficult parts, is becoming a resource for others in ways that are not yet fully visible, but that are real, and that will become increasingly real as you move through and beyond the current chapter. The testimony forming in your life is not just for you. It is for everyone whose path will cross yours in the seasons ahead. Everyone who will need exactly what you are learning to carry through this process. And when the time comes, and you find yourself sitting with someone who is in the middle of their own hard chapter, you will have something to offer them that goes beyond words. You will offer them the company of someone who has been there. And that company is worth more than most people realize until they are in the place where they desperately need it. I want to take a moment to address something that has sometimes accompanied the difficulty of this season. Something quieter and less easily named than the more concrete challenges. I am talking about the subtle erosion of confidence that extended difficulty can produce. Not the dramatic kind of loss of confidence that announces itself clearly. The quieter kind that accumulates gradually over a long season, where each unresolved situation adds a small weight to the accumulation. And over time, the accumulation becomes significant enough to affect how you see yourself and how you approach what is in front of you. The confidence that was natural and unguarded before the season began has become more cautious. the willingness to step out and try and risk, that has become more measured. Not because you became less capable, but because the season taught you, in the way that extended difficulty tends to teach, that outcomes are not always in your control, and that stepping out does not always produce what you hoped it would. I hear that, and I want to speak directly into it. The caution that this season produced in you has some value. There are forms of recklessness that needed to be tempered. There are overconfidences that needed to be replaced with a more grounded, more genuinely trusting kind of confidence. That is true. But I do not want the tempering to become paralysis. I do not want the appropriate learning that comes from a difficult season to calcify into a permanent hesitation that keeps you from moving when I am calling you to move. So I want to say this to you clearly. The confidence I want you to carry going forward is not confidence in your own management of outcomes. It is confidence in me. Confidence that when I open a door, I have already prepared what is behind it. Confidence that when I call you to step out, I have already gone before you into the space you are stepping into. Confidence that the next chapter, which I have already written, is a chapter I am fully prepared to navigate with you, and that my preparation for it is complete. Step out of the difficulty with the right kind of confidence. Not the old, self-reliant confidence that managed outcomes through personal capability. The new, deeper, more rooted confidence that trusts not in its own management, but in the faithfulness of the one who holds the outcomes. That confidence cannot be shaken by what happens, because it is not standing on what happens. It is standing on who I am, and who I am does not change. Let me also address the question of gratitude, which may feel like an unusual thing to bring up in the middle of a season that has had so much in it that felt undeserved and hard. Gratitude is not the denial of difficulty. It is not the spiritual discipline of pretending that hard things were not hard, or that you should feel good about things that were genuinely painful. Real gratitude is something different. It is the practice of giving full and honest weight to all of it, the hard and the good, and maintaining an orientation of thankfulness toward the one who was present in all of it. Thankfulness for the hard things, not because the hard things were pleasant, but because you did not go through them alone, because I was in them with you, because the hard things, as hard as they were, produced things in you that you value and could not have received any other way. When gratitude includes the hard things, not as things to be thankful for in themselves, but as things that I worked in and through to produce something genuinely good, it becomes a much more comprehensive and honest orientation toward life. And that comprehensive gratitude produces a kind of joy that is not dependent on circumstances being favorable, because it has learned to find the evidence of my goodness, not just in the easy things, but in the fullness of everything, including the difficult. That orientation toward life, the orientation of someone who has learned to find and receive my goodness even in the hard chapters, is something that this season has been building in you, and it will color every season that follows with a richness that you could not have had before. Now, as I move forward in this conversation, let me shift from what has been being built to what is being released, because the season of heavy building always gives way, at the right time, to the season of fruit. The preparation always reaches its completion, and then what has been prepared enters a different phase, a phase of expression and harvest, and visible result, and you are approaching that transition. Not yet fully in it, but approaching it. And there are things I want to begin releasing over your life even now, in this moment of our conversation, that will be the first signs of that transition becoming real. Open your hands, not as a religious gesture, as an actual, real, internal posture of receiving. Close the part of you that has been holding yourself in as a form of self-protection, and open the part of you that can receive. Because what I am releasing over you does not fit into a closed hand or land well in a heart that has been wrapped in protection against further disappointment. It requires an open hand, a posture of genuine receptivity. And I am asking you to find that posture now, to whatever degree your current experience allows you to access it. What I am releasing is not just circumstantial improvement. I am releasing a change in the interior atmosphere of your life. The weight that has been constant is beginning to lift. Not all at once, Not in the dramatic way of a single dramatic moment that resolves everything simultaneously, but gradually, and with increasing reality. The heaviness that has been the background condition of this season is shifting. Something is becoming lighter. Something that has felt stuck is beginning to move. Something that has been blocked is finding an opening. And these interior shifts are the forerunners of the exterior changes that follow them. Before the circumstances change, the atmosphere changes. Before the outer story shifts, the inner story shifts. And the inner story is shifting. Receive what is coming. Welcome it, even before you can clearly see it. Because the receiving begins before the arrival, and the posture of genuine welcome is part of what draws what is coming more fully into your life. This is not magic. It is the principle of spiritual alignment. When what is inside me aligns with what is coming from me, the receiving is more complete. So align yourself with what I am releasing over you. Agree with it. Welcome it. Make room for it in the interior architecture of your life. And watch as the outer begins to reflect what is already changing in the inner. What I am bringing towards you is more than you are currently asking for, because what I am bringing is not calibrated to the surface expression of your need, but to the full depth of what you actually need, which I can see better than you can. What you will receive will address not just the immediate presenting need, but the underlying thing, the real thing, the thing beneath the surface thing that has been the actual source of the difficulty all along. And in addressing the underlying thing, what you receive will resolve not just the current chapter, but lay a foundation for the chapters ahead that is qualitatively different from anything that was there before. Something extraordinary is unfolding, quietly, in the days that look ordinary, with care and precision and love that is as characteristic of me as breathing is of you. The story is moving. The tapestry is being completed. The race is reaching its final stretch. And the one who loves you most is right here in every one of these unfolding moments, working with everything he has toward the magnificent ending he has always planned for you. Can I ask you something? Not because I do not know the answer, but because I want you to hear yourself respond to it honestly. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a difficult chapter of your life and concluded that this particular chapter could not possibly be leading somewhere good? Have you ever looked at the accumulation of your circumstances, the way things were not resolving the way you hoped, the way the picture was not clearing, the way the prayers were not producing the kind of visible results that would make it easy to keep praying, and reached a quiet, private conclusion that this chapter was simply not a good chapter? That perhaps the story itself, whatever you believed about it in more hopeful seasons, was not as good as you thought. If that resonates with you, I do not want you to feel ashamed of it. That kind of thinking happens inside a very specific experience, and the experience is this. You are in the middle of a chapter while simultaneously trying to evaluate the overall quality of the story. And that is something that cannot be done accurately from inside the middle. You need the full story to evaluate it, and you do not yet have the full story. What you have is the chapters up to now, which is a lot of story but not all of it. And from an incomplete story, drawing a final verdict is not possible without getting it wrong. Here is the distinction I want to press into you with some real force today, because it is one that will change how you experience every difficult season that comes your way from this point forward. And difficult seasons are a feature of a life that is genuinely alive, rather than merely comfortable. There is a fundamental and enormous difference between a hard chapter and a story going wrong. Let me say that again, because the way most people experience difficulty, they are conflating those two things. A hard chapter is not a story going wrong. Difficulty is not failure. A season of struggle is not evidence of a failed story. It is evidence of a story with enough substance and gravity and real stakes to carry genuine meaning. Think about this with me. Think about the stories that have ever truly moved you. The ones that changed something in how you saw yourself, or the world, or other people. The stories that stayed with you, that you came back to in your own moments of difficulty because they gave you something real to hold on to. Were those stories easy? Were they about characters who sailed through unchallenged, for whom every door opened on the first knock, and every prayer was answered on the same day it was offered, and every season was brief and comfortable and clearly resolved? No. The stories that move people are the ones where something genuinely hard happened and was genuinely navigated, where the character faced something that could have broken them and found a way through, where the resolution, when it finally came, was hard-won and therefore meaningful rather than casually received and therefore forgettable. Your story is one that is going to move people, not the easy version of your story. Not the story that could have been told if every chapter had been short and uncomplicated. The story with the long chapters. The story with the sustained difficulty and the daily recommitment to trust. The story where the character had to dig deeper than they thought was possible and found that there was always more to draw from than they feared. That story is going to move people, because it is the kind of story that only the most real and profound faithfulness can produce. Now let me address something that may be quietly compounding the difficulty you have been navigating. It is the comparison. The looking at what seems to be happening in other people's stories and measuring your own chapter against theirs. The noticing that for some people around you, the chapters seem shorter, the resolutions seem faster, the blessings seem more readily visible, and the quiet, sometimes barely acknowledged question that comparison produces. Why is my chapter going this way when theirs seems to be going differently? I want to gently but firmly redirect you from that line of questioning. Not because the question is illegitimate, not because your pain in the comparison is not real, but because the comparison is being made between what you can see of your story from inside it and what you can see of theirs from outside it. And those are two completely different views that cannot be meaningfully compared. From inside your own story, you feel the weight and the uncertainty and the length. From outside someone else's story, you see only what is visible, which is almost always the more resolved, the more openly joyful, the more easily shareable parts. The comparison is not between your reality and their reality. It is between your reality and their carefully curated surface. And that comparison will never be fair and will never produce accurate conclusions. More importantly, even if you could see their story fully, the comparison would still be beside the point. Because your story is not their story. What I am building through your particular life, through your particular combination of gifts and calling and history and relationships and journey, is specific to you. The timeline I am working with in your story is calibrated to the specific thing I am building, not to some standard timeline that applies across all stories. The chapter you are in is the length it is not by error, but by design. Because the thing I am building in you through it requires the time it is taking. Comparing your timeline to someone else's is like comparing the baking time of two completely different kinds of bread. The comparison tells you nothing useful about whether your bread is going to be good. Let me walk with you for a moment into the specific experience of a rainy season, not the brief, refreshing rain that lifts the spirits and passes quickly. The sustained rain. The kind that goes on long enough that you begin to wonder whether it is ever going to stop. The kind that changes the character of every day for a prolonged period, making certain things harder than they would normally be, requiring adjustments and adaptations that you would not have chosen to make if the rain had not come. That is the kind of rain that feels most like an obstacle to what you are trying to do and to where you are trying to go. But consider what sustained rain does in the deep places. Consider the aquifer, far beneath the surface of the ground, that fills not from single brief showers, but from extended periods of saturation, when the water has time to work its way through the layers of soil and rock and find its way to the deep reservoirs that hold water through seasons of drought. The showers that come and go quickly barely reach the aquifer. The water that fills it, that sustains life through long dry seasons, comes from the extended rains. In the rain you have been in, the sustained, extended, sometimes relentless season of difficulty and uncertainty and waiting, that rain has been filling something in you that brief showers could never have reached. It has been filling a deep reservoir of trust and faith and genuine knowing of me that will sustain you through every future dry season. That is not a small thing. That reservoir is one of the most valuable things you possess. And it was filled through exactly the kind of sustained rain you have been enduring. What the rain has prepared in the deep places of your life is not yet fully visible, but it is there, filled and waiting. And when the seasons ahead come, the ones that will require a depth of knowing and trusting that surface-level spirituality cannot sustain, you will discover that something in you is sufficient for them. not because of anything you manufactured during this season, but because I used this season to build something in you that is now genuinely yours. The reservoir is yours. The depth is yours. The capacity to sustain trust through uncertainty, because you have practiced it, is yours. Now let me talk about what the rain has been doing in the outer conditions of your life, not just in you, but around you, because the preparation has not been happening only internally. Things have been shifting in the landscape of your circumstances in ways that were not visible from where you stood inside the rain. Relationships that needed to be repositioned have been quietly repositioning. Opportunities that needed to develop before they could be clearly recognized as opportunities have been developing. Situations that needed to reach a certain point before they could turn have been traveling toward that turning point. The rain has been doing work on the surface as well as in the depths. And the turning point, when it comes, and it is coming, will be turning towards something that the rain prepared. There is a chapter in the story of Joseph that I want to reference, not to rehearse the whole story, but to pull out one specific truth. When Joseph was in the pit, when his brothers had thrown him in that hole and were eating bread while he called out from below, the text says something remarkable. It says the pit was empty. There was no water in it. He was sitting at the bottom of an empty pit, calling out, and his brothers could hear him and did not respond, and they sat down to eat as though nothing unusual was happening. That is a picture of profound abandonment. The person who should be safe is in a hole. The people who should help him are ignoring him. The pit itself offers nothing. And yet the next chapter of Joseph's story is not the pit. It is the journey toward everything I had planned for him, a journey that went through more difficulty before it reached resolution, but that arrived, eventually and undeniably, at a place where he could look back and say with genuine understanding, "You meant it for evil, but I can see now how it became good." That sentence, uttered from the perspective of the ending, could never have been understood from inside the pit. From inside the pit, there was nothing to suggest that good was coming. From inside the pit, the evidence pointed only toward further abandonment. But the author of Joseph's story was not asleep in the pit. The author was working in the pit. The pit itself was part of the path. Not every difficult chapter is a pit, but some of what you have been experiencing in this season has had something of the pit's quality to it. The sense of being in a low place. The sense that the people or circumstances that should have helped have not helped. The sense of calling out and hearing silence in response. And if any of that resonates with you, I want to give you what I want to give Joseph's descendants as they hear his story. The pit is not the ending. The pit is a chapter. And the author who watched Joseph in his pit is the same author who is watching you in yours. And the author never writes a story that ends in the pit. What I am doing in this chapter of your life is working from multiple directions simultaneously toward a convergence that will become visible at the right moment. It is not a single thread I am pulling. It is a complex orchestration of many threads, many circumstances, many people, many movements, all of which need to reach certain points at certain times for the overall picture to emerge clearly. You can only see the threads that are nearest to you, but I see them all. And the picture they are forming is coherent and intentional and beautiful. Even now, even in the parts that are still murky from where you stand, the picture is beautiful to me. What I want from you in the days ahead is something very specific. Not heroism, not dramatic acts of faith. What I want from you is consistent, faithful, intentional engagement with the life in front of you, the relationships in front of you, the responsibilities in front of you, the inner life that is your constant companion. Tend those things as though they matter, because they do. The quality of your daily faithfulness in this season is part of what positions you for what is coming. The person who is careless with the ordinary in seasons of waiting often finds that the extraordinary, when it arrives, is more difficult to receive and steward than it would have been if the season of waiting had been used to build capacity rather than to mark time. Tend what is in front of you. Bring your whole self to what is in your hands right now, even if what is in your hands is smaller than what you envisioned having by this point in your life. Even if the current chapter is quieter than you expected. Even if the visibility of your life right now is not the visibility you hoped for. The quality of your engagement with what is current, is a form of preparation for what is coming. And what is coming is worth preparing for. A chapter that looks like rain is preparing the ground for what I am about to plant. The preparation is real. The planting is coming. And the harvest, when it arrives, is going to bear the unmistakable marks of having been grown in ground that was thoroughly, carefully, lovingly prepared by a season that seemed only like difficulty, but was also, beneath the surface, deep and purposeful preparation. There is a conversation I want to have with you about the nature of endings and beginnings, because the way you think about these things shapes how you navigate the transitions of your life. And I believe you are approaching a transition. Not every chapter ending is what it appears to be from inside the chapter. Some things that look like endings from where you stand are actually the final paragraphs of one chapter and the opening sentences of the next, so close together that the ending of one and the beginning of the other are almost indistinguishable. You see the door that is closing and you call it loss. But I am also opening the next room, and the next room is where the next chapter lives, and the next chapter is one that the closing of the current door makes it possible to enter. Not every closed door is a failed story. Some closed doors are completed chapters. There is a difference. A failed story is one that goes nowhere, that builds and builds toward a resolution that never comes, that leaves every thread hanging. A completed chapter is one that accomplished what it was meant to accomplish, built into the overall story what it was designed to build, and reached its natural end so that the next chapter can begin. The chapters of your life that have felt like closings, the things that ended in this season that you did not choose to end, look again at them with this frame. Not, what failed here, but, what did this chapter complete? What did it build? What did it lay down as foundation for what comes next? Because every chapter that truly ends leaves something, and what it leaves is what the author needed it to leave before the next chapter could begin. Let me talk about the concept of glory as I mean it when I say that your story ends in glory. Because this word is used in many ways and carries many different associations, and I want to be precise about what I mean, because precision matters when the word carries this much weight. When I speak of glory, I am not speaking primarily of dramatic external success, though what I have planned for you includes dimensions of that. I am not speaking primarily of recognition or achievement, or the accomplishment of goals that others can measure, though those things may certainly be part of what arrives. When I speak of glory, I am speaking of something that is first and fundamentally internal, and then expresses itself externally. Glory, in the way I mean it, is the quality of a life that unmistakably reflects my character and my presence. It is the weight, the substance, the radiance that comes from a life lived in genuine connection with me over a long time, through difficulty and through ease, through seasons of clarity and through seasons of confusion, through the easy chapters and the hard ones. That quality, that weight, that substance, is what I am calling toward expression in your life. Not as something manufactured or performed, but as something that emerges naturally from a genuine, long-sustained relationship with me. The kind of relationship that this season has been deepening. That glory does not announce itself dramatically. It does not require a stage or a production. It is present in the texture of how you live, in how you speak to people, in the quality of attention you give to the ones in front of you, in the steadiness you carry into difficult situations that used to rattle you, and now find you grounded in a way that surprises even you sometimes. It is present in the freedom with which you forgive, in the generosity with which you give, in the courage with which you step into what I am calling you toward, even when the stepping is costly. That is glory in the way I mean it, and it is being formed in you, right now, through this very season. The glory I am bringing out of your life is not something I am delivering to you from outside. It is something I am bringing out from inside you, where I placed it long ago, where it has been developing through every chapter of your story. When people encounter you in the chapters ahead, they will encounter something in you that they cannot entirely name but that they recognize as real. A quality of presence, of peace, of genuine hope that has been through something and held, that carries a credibility that easy optimism never possesses. They will encounter someone who does not pretend that life is without difficulty, but who has found, through genuine difficulty, that the one who holds all things is genuinely trustworthy, and that encounter will touch them in places that nothing else can reach. Because what you carry has been authenticated by the very season you have been in. The hard chapter did not diminish what I placed in you. It brought it to the surface. It made it visible. It gave it the kind of credibility that only real experience can provide. Now let me speak into the specific question of what it means to walk well in the season between now and the visible arrival of what I have been preparing. Because this in-between space, the space between the promise and the fulfillment, the space between the chapter that is completing and the chapter that is beginning, this is a space that requires its own particular way of navigating. And navigating it well is worth thinking carefully about. Walking well in the in-between means, first, maintaining your engagement with what is actually in front of you, rather than living in a perpetual anticipation of what is ahead. The person who is so focused on the next chapter that they are barely present to the current one misses what the current chapter holds and enters the next one without what the current one was designed to give them. Presence to the now, even when the now is not everything you hoped for, is part of what makes the transition to what is next healthy and complete. Walking well in the in-between means, second, maintaining the practices that have sustained you through the difficult parts of this season. The prayer that has been your anchor, the community of people who have walked with you through the hard parts, the relationship with Scripture that has given you access to truth when your own thinking was less reliable. Do not abandon these things because the season is shifting. The practices that carried you through the hard part of the journey carry you through the transition as well. And carrying them through the transition carries them into the next chapter, where they will be equally needed, in different forms perhaps, but equally real in their importance. The third dimension of navigating the in-between well is allowing hope to begin recalibrating toward what is ahead without demanding that it arrive before it is ready. There is a kind of hope that gets ahead of the reality and then crashes when the reality does not match the anticipation. This is a function of hope that is more about relief from the current difficulty than about genuine trust in what I am bringing. I understand why it forms, especially in long seasons. The desperation for relief can shape hope into something that is more about ending the pain than about receiving what I am actually preparing. But that shape of hope leaves you vulnerable to discouragement when the specific form of relief you anticipated is not the form that arrives. What I am asking you to cultivate is hope that is more rooted in who I am than in a specific vision of how and when what is coming will arrive. Hope that says, whatever form the good I am bringing takes, I trust that it is genuinely good, that it addresses what actually needs addressing, that it carries my fingerprints in it even if it does not look exactly like what I imagined. That is a more resilient hope. It can receive what actually comes, rather than being disappointed that what comes is not identical to the imagined version. And what actually comes, let me tell you again, is better than what you currently have in mind. Not just equal to it, better, more complete, more tailored to the actual depth of your need, more expressive of the nature of the God who is bringing it. Let me spend a moment on what I want the transition ahead of you to feel like, not just what I want it to include. Because how you experience a transition matters as much as what the transition contains. The transition I am bringing you into is not meant to feel like an explosion, a sudden massive shift that leaves you overwhelmed by the change, even though the change is good. I am bringing you into it gradually, purposefully, in a way that allows you to receive each new development and integrate it before the next one arrives. This is grace. This is the care of someone who knows that too much too fast, even when it is all good, can be destabilizing in ways that are not ultimately good for the person receiving it. What I have planned for you is abundant, and abundance needs to arrive in a form that a human being can actually receive and integrate and steward well. So the transition is deliberate. It is intentional in its pacing, and the pace is not slow, because what is coming is small. The pace is deliberate because what is coming is large, and large things need to be received with care. Trust the pace as much as you trust the destination. Both are in my hands, and both are exactly right for you. There is a phrase I want to give you for the days ahead. a phrase to return to when the questions come back and the uncertainty wants to set the tone of a given day. The phrase is this: the story is still being written. Say it out loud if you need to. Write it somewhere visible if that would help. Return to it on the days when what you see around you seems to suggest the story has stalled or gone wrong. The story is still being written. The pen is still moving. The author is still fully engaged with every page. And the page you are on right now, this one, the one that contains this exact day and this exact experience and this exact moment of your life, this page is full of meaning and intention, even when it does not feel that way. The story is still being written. And the thing about a story that is still being written is that it has not yet reached its end. And a story that has not yet reached its end cannot be accurately judged from the middle. Every reader who has ever put down a difficult book halfway through and said this story is not going anywhere good has made the same mistake. They evaluated the full story based on an incomplete reading. Do not do that to your own story. Keep reading. Keep engaging with the pages in front of you. Trust the author. And trust that the pages you have not yet read are worth getting to. Because what I have written on them for you is worth every step of the journey that it takes to arrive there. The journey is still unfolding, and I am in it with you. In every chapter, in every transition, in every moment between the chapters, in every step of the road between where you are now and the destination that already exists, complete and glorious, in the knowledge of the God who loves you and who has never, not for one single moment in all of your story, put down the pen. There is a kind of work that can only be seen from the front of the tapestry. Stand behind it, and all you see is the tangle, the crossed threads, the knots at the backs of the colors, the endings that seem to go nowhere, and the paths that seem to contradict each other. The tapestry seen from behind looks like chaos to anyone who does not know what a tapestry looks like from the front. But turn it around. Hold it up to the light. Let the full picture become visible from the angle it was designed to be seen from. And what was chaos becomes coherence. What were random knots become the structural components of something breathtaking. What seemed like contradictions become the very intersections where the most complex and beautiful parts of the design emerge. You have been standing behind your tapestry. For the duration of this season, you have been seeing the underside of what I am weaving through your life. And from that vantage point, it has not always looked like a coherent design. The knots have been visible. The crossed threads have been confusing. The endings that seem to go nowhere have been discouraging. And I have been at the loom the entire time, working from the other side, seeing the picture that is forming with every pass of the thread, knowing with absolute precision what every knot contributes to the overall design. Here is what I want to tell you about the tapestry of your life from my vantage point. The piece being created is extraordinary, not ordinary, not average, not the predictable kind of piece that anyone with enough skill could have produced. The piece being woven through your particular combination of gifts and history, and calling and journey, is something that bears my signature unmistakably. When it is finally fully visible, when it is held up to the light in its completion, it will not be possible to look at it and not see my hand in it. The intricacy of the design, the way the colors work together, including the darker ones. The way the most difficult threads, the ones that seemed most out of place when they were being laid, are revealed in the finished piece as the ones that give it its most distinctive character. That is your tapestry, and I am still weaving it, with as much attention and intention and love as I brought to the first thread. Let me now speak directly and specifically about what I am completing in your life, not in broad strokes, but in the particular details that I know matter most to you. Because you need to hear not just that things are going to be good in some general sense, but that the specific things you have been carrying, the specific areas of your life where the waiting has been concentrated, are known to me in their specificity and are being addressed by me with that same specificity. Let me speak first about the areas where there has been lack, where the resources have not matched the needs, where the numbers have not added up in the way you needed them to, and the anxiety of that gap has been a constant companion. I want to say something about provision that goes deeper than the simple promise that it is coming. What I am building in the area of your provision is not just an improvement on the current situation. What I am constructing is a different relationship with the concept of sufficiency itself. There are people who have everything they need and are still in constant anxiety about whether they will continue to have it. And there are people who have gone through seasons of genuine lack and come out the other side with a quality of trust in my provision that no circumstance can shake, because they have seen me provide when providing seemed impossible. What I am building in you, through this season of living closer to the edge than you would have chosen, is that second kind of relationship with provision. When what I am sending arrives, you will receive it differently than you would have before this season. You will hold it differently, steward it differently, because you will know, from direct experience, that it came from me, and that it can come from me again whenever it is needed. That knowledge is an asset beyond what the provision itself provides. Concerning the relationships in your life, the ones that have been strained or uncertain or absent in this season, I want you to hear something that I hope brings some peace into the complexity you have been navigating. Not every relationship that has been difficult in this season was difficult because something went permanently wrong. Some of the difficulty in relationships has been the friction of two people being formed through their own processes that temporarily put them out of alignment with each other, even though the underlying connection is real and the future of the relationship is good. The strain you have experienced does not always predict the end. Sometimes it predicts the breakthrough. Sometimes the period of distance or difficulty in a relationship is the period that clears out what needed to be cleared, that brings to the surface what needed to be addressed, so that what comes after is cleaner and more honest and more genuinely rooted than what was there before. The relationships that I have ordained for your life, the ones I have placed in your story with the intention of them going all the way with you, are not fragile things. They are not so delicate that a difficult season dissolves them. They are built on something more durable than ease, and the difficulty they have been through in this season has not weakened their foundations, but tested them in ways that will ultimately reveal how solid those foundations are. And for the relationships that have proven through this testing that their foundations were not as solid as they appeared, I am working even in those losses. Because even the departure of what was not meant to remain is a form of preparation for what is. The space created is not empty space. It is space being prepared for something that fits your life and your calling and your future in a way that what left could not. As for the work of your hands, the endeavors you have been pouring yourself into, the things you have built and tended and invested in during this season, sometimes with visible return and sometimes without it, I want to speak with real specificity into what you have been doing. Nothing invested in faithfulness is wasted in my economy. That is not a platitude. It is a principle that operates consistently in the way I work. What you plant in faithfulness, I tend. What you build in integrity, I reinforce. What you pour yourself into with genuine intention to honor me and serve others, I receive and work with in ways that extend far beyond what you can see from where you stand. The work you have done, that has seemed to produce little visible fruit in this season, is not wasted work. It is seed that has not yet matured. There is work that produces immediate visible results, and that kind of work has its own satisfaction and its own purpose. But there is also work that does not produce immediate visible results, work that goes into the ground like seed and stays quiet for longer than expected, and then emerges in the fullness of its time, in a form that makes the investment so obviously worthwhile that the season of apparent fruitlessness seems, from the perspective of the harvest, to have been actually very fruitful all along. You have been doing that second kind of work, the kind that is invisible before it is visible, and the season of its visibility is drawing closer than you know. What you have planted through your faithfulness in this season is reaching the point of emergence. The work that has seemed to go nowhere is approaching the moment when it becomes clear that it was going somewhere all along. Not because of something you did to accelerate it, but because my timing, which governs the seasons of things growing in my economy, is moving these things into their season of expression. The investment you made will be seen. The faithfulness you brought to the planting will be reflected in the quality of what emerges. And what emerges will make the investment feel not just worthwhile, but revelatory, in the sense that it will reveal, looking back, how completely I was working in the season that looked most quiet. there is something I want to say about your sense of purpose and direction, because this is an area where this season has brought particular confusion. There have been moments when the path was clear and the direction was obvious, and the sense of alignment between who you are and what you are doing was strong. And then this season came, and some of that clarity softened. The direction felt less certain. The sense of purpose was still there, because purpose is something I plant deep, and it does not evaporate in a season. But the clarity of its expression felt murkier than before. That is not because the purpose changed. The purpose I placed in you before you were formed is still there, as real and specific and irreversible as it has ever been. What has been happening is a refinement rather than a dissolution. The expression of your purpose in the next chapter of your journey is going to be more focused, more genuine, more fully itself than what it was in the chapters before. And refinement requires a period where the current form is, in a sense, dissolved, so that the pure form can emerge. That period of dissolution can feel like loss of direction. It can feel like the purpose has gone dim. But it has not gone dim. It is being refined. And what emerges from the refinement will be sharper and clearer and more specifically yours than what existed before the refining season began. Walk forward in the direction of what you most deeply know yourself to be called toward. Not the surface expression, which may need to continue evolving. The deep thing. The thing that has been consistent in you across different seasons and different circumstances. The call that was there before this season and is still there through it. That thing is not going away. It is not being revoked. It is being refined. And the refined version of it, when it finds its clearest expression in the chapter that is coming, is going to be something you recognize as more fully and authentically yourself than anything that came before. Now let me speak a declaration over you that comes not as a performance, but as the genuine expression of what I have determined concerning you. This is not wishful thinking. This is not religious sentiment that sounds good, but lacks substance. What I am about to speak is what actually is, from my perspective, which is the perspective that will ultimately be proven accurate. You are moving toward the completion of what I began. Every single thing I started in you, every good work I planted, every gift I deposited, every calling I established, every promise I spoke over your life, those things are not in danger of going uncompleted because this season has been long. They are not at risk of failing because the timing has not gone the way you expected. They are in the hands of a God who does not begin what he is not committed to finishing, who does not plant what he does not intend to harvest, who does not make promises that he allows to expire before they are fulfilled. The trajectory of your story, from where I stand, is upward. Not in the sense of an unbroken line of improvement with no variation, but in the sense that the overall arc, when you can see it fully, bends toward glory. The glory that is coming toward you is not coming in spite of what you have walked through. It is coming through what you have walked through, carried and shaped, and made more resonant by the difficulty that preceded it. The testimony that is forming in your life is not a testimony that says things were easy. It is the more powerful, more moving, more credible testimony that says things were hard, and the author proved faithful anyway. And not just barely faithful. Magnificently, undeniably, beyond what was expected faithful. That is the God you are dealing with. The God who does not do things barely. The God who, when he moves in ways that reflect the fullness of who he is. The God whose faithfulness, when it becomes visible, is not merely adequate, but overwhelming. That kind of God is the one completing your story, and the completion that is coming reflects the nature of the one who is completing it. Hold on, bearer of my promise. Not with desperate gripping, with confident expectation. The tapestry is still being woven. The threads are still being placed with precision and love. The picture is becoming more complete with every passing day. And from where I stand, seeing the full picture that is forming, I can tell you without any reservation that what I see is magnificent. Every thread in its right place, every color contributing to the whole, every difficult knot on the underside doing exactly what it was placed there to do. And the front of the tapestry, when you finally see it fully, is going to take your breath away. There are specific areas of your life that I want to name and speak into with more directness, because I think you need to hear me engage with the particulars, rather than only with the broader themes. Because the broader themes, as true and important as they are, can sometimes float at a level that does not quite reach the specific ache of where you actually are. So let me come down from the altitude of the general and sit with you in the specific. Let me speak about the area of your inner life first, the life inside your own head and heart that you live with every day, but that very few people around you have full access to. The internal monologue that accompanies everything you do, the ongoing conversation you have with yourself about what is happening and what it means and what you should feel about it and whether you are responding to it rightly. In this season, that internal conversation has sometimes not been your friend. There have been narratives that formed inside you during this difficult chapter that were not narratives I authored. Stories you told yourself about your own adequacy or inadequacy, about whether you were handling things well enough, about whether the difficulty you were in said something damning about who you are or how you had navigated your life. Judgments you rendered against yourself that I was not party to and would not have endorsed. Let me be very clear about something. The judgment you have rendered against yourself in the hard moments of this season is not my judgment. My judgment of you, which is the only judgment that carries actual weight, is not shaped by how you have performed in the difficulty. My judgment of you is shaped by who I see when I look at you, which is someone I chose, someone I love, someone in whom I have invested deeply, and whose story I am fully committed to. The internal narrative that has been harsh with you is not from me. I want to give you permission, real permission, to lay it down. Not to pretend that you have navigated everything perfectly, because you have not. And honest acknowledgement of real shortcomings is part of healthy growth. But to stop rehearsing the harshest version of yourself as though that is the most accurate one. The most accurate version of who you are is the one I see. And what I see, I value. What I see, I am invested in. What I see, I am working to bring into its fullest possible expression. The self-criticism that sometimes takes up residence in a person during a difficult season serves a limited purpose at best. In small doses and specific applications, it can prompt genuine growth and appropriate course corrections. But in the quantities that a hard season can produce, it becomes a weight that slows the running rather than a tool that sharpens the stride. So release it. Release the rehearsal of your own failures and shortcomings as though they define you. Carry instead the image of yourself that I carry, the image of someone in process, being formed and shaped and developed. Someone whose current imperfections are part of the ongoing work of my hands, rather than final verdicts about who they are. Turn your attention with me now to the area of your relationships, and let me engage with them more specifically than I have done so far. Because relationships are one of the places where difficulty most immediately and acutely registers, and the relational texture of this season has been part of what has made it hard. There are relationships that did not hold up under the weight of what this season brought. And the loss of those relationships, or the diminishment of them, has been painful in a particular way, the way that relational losses are always painful, which is different from, and in some ways more personal, than other kinds of loss. Not every relationship that did not hold up under the pressure of this season was a relationship that was meant to last. Some of what fell away in this season fell away because it needed to. Not because the people involved were bad or the connections were valueless, but because the season revealed that the foundation of certain connections was not deep enough to carry what the season demanded of them. And what falls away when the weight is applied, what proves unable to sustain the pressure, was always going to be less durable than it appeared in easier conditions. The season did not break those connections. It revealed what was already true about their load-bearing capacity. And while the revelation is painful, it is also clarifying. You can only build a life on connections whose foundations you actually know. The season showed you the foundations. For the connections that did hold, that proved in this season that they could sustain real weight, those connections are now something more substantial than they were before the season began. A relationship that has been through difficulty together and remained intact is a relationship that has been tested. and tested things have a quality of reliability that untested things, however pleasant, cannot match. So take note of those relationships. Honor them. Invest in them, because they are the connections that are going to carry weight in the chapters ahead, and they have proven they are capable of doing so. As for the connections that are still forming, the relationships that are not yet fully in your life, but are being brought into proximity, there are people whose paths are being aligned with yours in the season that is coming. Not in a magical or arbitrary way, but because the nature of what you are moving toward is drawing toward it the people who belong in that next chapter. Callings attract each other. Purposes align. The work I have planned for the next phase of your journey requires specific people alongside you, and those people are being positioned. You will recognize them when you encounter them, not always immediately, but with a quality of resonance that is different from the ordinary meeting. Pay attention to those resonances. They are not accidents. They are introductions being made by the author of the story, who knows exactly whose paths need to cross and when. Let me turn to the area of your health and physical well-being. This is something I do not want to skip past, because for many people in seasons of extended difficulty, the body bears a significant portion of the cost of what the spirit and mind are carrying. Sustained stress, sustained uncertainty, sustained difficulty of any kind, has a way of expressing itself through the physical, and the body that has been asked to carry more than its normal load for an extended period reflects that in various ways. If you have felt in this season more physically depleted than the ordinary demands of your life would account for, that is not surprising. It is the body faithfully telling you what the sustained load has cost. What I want to say about your physical well-being is this. The restoration that comes after an extended period of heavy carrying is not merely the restoration of baseline function. It is a deeper restoration, a recalibration, the kind of renewal that the body is capable of when the load is lifted and the recovery is genuine. The kind of rest that follows a season of sustained effort is different in quality from ordinary rest. It goes deeper, it restores more. It reaches places that have been depleted in ways that ordinary fatigue and ordinary rest never access. And that kind of restoration is ahead of you. Real, deep, qualitatively different renewal. Not just for your spirit and your mind, but for the body that has been faithfully carrying all that your spirit and mind have been managing. Take care of yourself in the days ahead. Not as a spiritual obligation, but as an act of wisdom and, yes, of stewardship. The body I gave you is the vessel through which you will live and love and work and serve in the chapters ahead. Honor it. Give it what it needs as the load begins to lift. Allow the restoration to be real and unhurried, because what you are moving toward requires a vitality that is not diminished by the accumulated cost of what you have carried. It requires the restored version of you. And the restored version of you is exactly what I am working toward. Now let me speak with particular attention to the thing you have been believing for the longest, the prayer that has become a companion through so much of your spiritual journey that you almost cannot remember a version of your faith that did not include the carrying of this particular hope. This thing, whatever specific form it takes in your life, this persistent, long-carried hope, is something I want to speak into directly, and without the kind of vagueness that leaves you uncertain about whether I actually engaged with it. I heard it the first time you brought it. I have heard it every time since. Nothing about your continued bringing of it has felt like repetition to me in the way that might become tiresome. Each time you bring it is an act of trust that I receive. Each time you return to it is another expression of your belief that I am real and present and responsive. And that belief is itself a form of prayer that moves me. The long-held prayer is not a prayer I am tired of hearing. It is one I am moved by, because the person who brings the same hope to me across the length of a long season is demonstrating a quality of trust that goes deeper than feelings and sustains itself beyond what the circumstances support. This hope has not been misplaced. The thing you have been carrying before me is something I have been carrying with you. It has not fallen through any cracks in my attention. It has not been set aside in favor of more urgent matters, as though some of my children's needs were more compelling to me than yours. My attention is not parceled out in a way that leaves some needs underserved. My capacity to hold every need of every child simultaneously with full attention and full care, is unlimited. And your long-held hope has been held by me with that full and complete attention throughout the entire duration of this season. What is taking shape in response to that long-held prayer is not small. It is not a bare minimum answer that addresses the surface need while leaving the underlying thing untouched. What I am building in response to the fullness of that hope is something that addresses the whole of it, the dimensions of it that you can see, and the ones you cannot. And when it arrives, it will not feel like a partial answer. It will feel like the kind of answer that only I could give, the kind that exceeds what was hoped for in ways that make the hopefulness of the hoping look, in retrospect, almost conservative. Trust a little longer. Not because the waiting is the point, not because I am asking you to find some inherent virtue in delay, but because the thing being built in response to your hoping is worth the building time. And the building time is almost finished. The assembly of what is coming toward you is in its final stages. The positioning that was necessary is largely complete. What has been in preparation is very close to being ready for release. And when it is released, it will be released in the way that I release things, fully and with evidence of care that the waiting now makes impossible to mistake for ordinary coincidence. A thing worth having is worth the time it takes to truly arrive. And what I am bringing toward you is worth the time it has taken. Let that be something that calms rather than frustrates you. The length of the waiting is not proportional to the size of the obstacle. It is proportional to the magnitude of the preparation. Large things require more preparation than small things. Lasting things require deeper foundations than temporary things. What is coming toward you is both large and lasting, and the preparation has been commensurate with its size and its duration, which means that what arrives, when it arrives, will be as solid and as real and as fully itself as anything you have ever received, because it was built with the kind of thoroughness that only extended preparation makes possible. So receive this now as a word that I am placing specifically in you for the season ahead. What I began in you will reach its completion. The specific, personal, intimate promises I have spoken over your life are not theoretical promises that apply in some general way to all my children. They are yours, specific to your name, your calling, your story, your season. And what is specific to you is being addressed by me with specific attention and specific action. You are not a general case being handled by a system. You are a child being personally loved by a father who knows you completely and is invested in your specific well-being, in your specific future, and your specific flourishing in ways that are tailored entirely to you. Walk forward in the knowledge of that. Walk forward as someone who is specifically loved, specifically known, and specifically being cared for by a God whose capacity to do so does not diminish across the number of children he carries simultaneously. Walk forward as someone whose story matters, and whose prayers are heard, and whose long-held hopes are in the hands of the one who can actually bring them to fulfillment. Walk forward as someone who has been in a season of genuine difficulty and genuine formation, and is now approaching the transition into what that season was preparing. Walk forward knowing that the transition is real, that what is coming is good, and that the one walking with you has never once taken his eyes off you or his hand from the work of bringing your story to its glorious completion. Before I speak the final words of this conversation, I want to do something that feels important. I want to slow down and stay with you in this specific moment, not rushing toward the conclusion, but honoring the weight of what has been shared between us. Because something real has happened in this conversation. Something has been deposited. Something has shifted, even if you cannot name it precisely yet. Even if the shift is subtle, and you will only recognize its full significance when you look back at this moment from a future vantage point. Something is different in you now than it was at the beginning of these words. And I do not want to rush past that as though it were ordinary. It is not ordinary. An encounter with truth, real truth, the kind that addresses the actual condition of a person's actual life, is never ordinary. And what you have received today is real. Let me say some specific things to you as this conversation approaches its close. Things that I want you to carry with you into the ordinary days that follow this one. The days that do not have the heightened quality of a moment like this. the days that are mostly composed of ordinary life, ordinary tasks, ordinary encounters, the texture of the regular. Because the truth received in the heightened moment has to survive the return to the ordinary. It has to carry its weight not just in the moment of receiving, but in the days and weeks that follow, when the feeling of the moment has faded, and what remains is either the truth itself, now resident in you, or the memory of a feeling that did not produce lasting change. What I want to remain in you from this conversation, what I want to find its home in the deepest and most permanent part of you, is this set of convictions: that the story is not broken, that the author is still at work, that what has been difficult has been purposeful, that what has been built in you through the difficulty is real and lasting and valuable, that what is coming toward you reflects the nature of the one who is bringing it, and that nature is overwhelmingly, specifically, and personally good toward you, and that the completion I have promised is in motion, is real, and will arrive in the way that truly good things arrive, more fully and more precisely than anticipated, bearing the marks of someone who knew exactly what was needed and provided exactly that. Plant those convictions in the ground of your daily life, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a practiced, lived orientation. Wake up in the morning and remind yourself of them before the day asserts its version of reality. Go to sleep knowing them, letting them be the last thought before rest takes over rather than the worries that otherwise tend to fill that space. Carry them into the difficult conversations and the uncertain decisions and the places where the old doubts want to reassert themselves. Let them be the filter through which you interpret what you encounter, rather than letting what you encounter be the filter through which you interpret them, because they are more reliable than your circumstances. They are more permanent than your feelings. They reflect a reality that transcends both the good and the difficult things that happen in a given day, a reality that holds constant through everything. I also want to give you permission to rest. Real, genuine, full rest. Not the rest of someone who is merely pausing before the next push of effort. The rest of someone who has received a word from the one who holds all things, and who knows that the holding is real and competent, and does not require their constant management. The rest that comes from genuinely trusting that you do not have to solve this, that you do not have to figure out the path forward completely before you can stop carrying the anxiety of not knowing, that you can lay down the weight of management, of trying to make things happen or keep things from happening, and rest in the knowledge that the one who manages all things is doing so with more skill and more love and more comprehensive awareness than anything you could bring to the management yourself. You have been carrying more than you were meant to carry alone, not because you were wrong to care about what you were carrying, but because some of what you have been carrying was never meant for your arms alone. It was meant to be shared, with me, with the people I have placed in your life to walk with you, with the community of faith that is designed to distribute the weight across more than one set of shoulders. If you have been carrying things alone that were designed to be shared, let this be the moment you begin the process of setting down what is not yours to carry alone and picking up instead the much lighter burden that I offer in its place. Not light because the work is small. Light because the yoke is shared and the one sharing it with you has infinitely more capacity than you do. As you go from this moment into the days ahead, go as someone who carries a word. Not a vague feeling of encouragement that dissipates in the first difficulty. A specific, weighty, real word from the God who made you and knows you and has never stopped working on the story of your life. That word says, the story is still being written. The author has not walked away. The ending is already planned, and it is magnificent. What I began in you will be brought to its full and glorious completion. Carry that word the way a person carries something precious, with attention, with care, with a resistance to letting the noise and the demands of ordinary days drown it out before it has had a chance to do its full work in you. Return to it when the noise gets loud. Repeat it when the doubts get insistent. Share it when you encounter someone who is in their own hard chapter and needs to hear that hard chapters are not the end of the story. Let it be a living thing in you, not a static memory, but an active truth that continues to inform how you see and how you move and how you relate to everything that is unfolding around you. One more thing. As you walk through the days ahead, watch for the signs. Not anxiously, not with the kind of hypervigilance that turns ordinary life into a constant search for evidence, but with the relaxed, open, attentive awareness of someone who knows that their God is at work and who is curious to see in what form the evidence will appear today. The signs of my movement are everywhere in a life that is paying attention. They are not always dramatic. Often they are quiet. A conversation that goes a direction you did not expect and leaves you with something you needed. A scripture that suddenly has new meaning. A situation that resolves in a way that was not predictable from the available information. A moment of unexpected peace in a circumstance that should have produced anxiety. A connection that forms in an ordinary place and turns out to carry extraordinary significance. Watch for those signs. Receive them. Let them build into an accumulating body of evidence that I am working. Because I am working. Consistently, continuously, in the visible and invisible dimensions of your story simultaneously. And the evidence of that work, if you are looking with open eyes, is available to you every day, in the texture of ordinary life, in the quieter forms of my provision and my presence that do not require announcement to be real. The race continues. The final stretch is being run. The story is being written. And the one who loves you most is here in every step of it, all the way to the ending that has always been the intention, the glorious, magnificent, unmistakably good ending that will make every chapter of the journey, including the hardest ones, make perfect sense. Walk forward, bearer of my promise, with your head up and your eyes fixed and your heart open to receive what is coming. Because it is coming. And it is good. There is something I want to say about the way that stories are remembered once they are complete. When a person has come through a long and difficult journey and can look back at it from the other side, there is an almost universal experience that happens in that looking back. The things that seemed most unbearably long in the living of them seem, from the perspective of the completed journey, to have been shorter than they felt. Not because the time was shorter, but because the perspective of the ending changes the felt experience of the journey. What seemed endless while you were in it becomes, in retrospect, a chapter. A specific, bounded, meaningful chapter that had a beginning and a middle and an end, and that was followed by something else. The endlessness was a perception from inside the chapter. From outside it, looking back, it was a season. And seasons, by definition, change. I want you to borrow that perspective now, while you are still inside the chapter. I know that borrowing the perspective of the ending while you are still in the middle is not a natural or easy thing to do. It requires a particular kind of faith, the faith of someone who has decided to trust the author's view of the story, rather than the reader's view from inside it. But if you can access even a partial version of that perspective, it will change something in how you experience what remains of this season. Because from even a partial outside perspective, you can begin to see the boundedness of what you are in. The fact that it has a shape, that it is a season, not an eternity, that it is a chapter, not the whole story, and that what comes after it is already real and good and waiting for you to arrive at it. Your story is not ending in the difficult chapter. Your story is being written through the difficult chapter and continuing beyond it into chapters that carry the glory I have always planned for you. And you will get to those chapters, not in spite of the current one, through it, on the other side of it, carrying what it built in you into everything that follows. The transition is real and it is approaching. And what you will find on the other side of it will make the faithfulness you brought to the difficult part feel like exactly the right investment, because it was. Let the truth of these words settle into you like rain into prepared ground. Let them find the deep places. Let them nourish what has been dry. Let them awaken what has been dormant. Because that is what truth does in a person who has been waiting for it, who has been in the hard chapter long enough that they are genuinely ready to receive something real and let it change them. You are that person. And this is that word. Receive it fully. Let it do its full work. And walk forward into the story that is still being written, with the confidence of someone who knows and trusts the one holding the pen. The story is not finished. the author is not done. And what comes next is already magnificent in his hands. What does it mean to trust someone with the chapters you have not yet read? It means choosing, deliberately and with full awareness of what the choice costs, to believe that the one who has already written those chapters wrote them with the same love and skill and intentionality that went into every chapter you have already lived through. It means releasing the need to see before you trust, and finding that in the releasing, a different kind of seeing becomes available. Not the seeing of the eyes, which requires evidence to precede belief, but the seeing of faith, which operates ahead of evidence, which looks at what cannot yet be verified and recognizes it as real because the one who promised it is real. That kind of seeing is what this season has been building in you, and it is one of the most valuable things you will carry into every chapter that follows. The ability to see with faith is not a smaller or lesser seeing than the seeing of evidence. It is a larger seeing. It perceives things that the evidence-requiring eyes cannot access. And what it sees, though it arrives ahead of the visible evidence, is no less true than what the visible evidence eventually confirms. Trust what your faith sees. Trust the author. Trust the story still being written in the chapters ahead. Let me also speak to the question of what you do with hope, when hope has been deferred long enough to become painful, because deferred hope does something specific to a person. The scripture says it makes the heart sick, and that is an accurate description. Not sick in a dramatic or disabling sense necessarily, but sick in the way that a wound that has been open too long begins to ache at a level that changes everything. A kind of pain that settles into the background of everything else and colors the texture of daily life even when it is not directly in focus. That kind of background aching is what extended deferred hope can produce. And I do not want to talk around it. I want to talk into it directly. The heart sickness of deferred hope is real, and I do not dismiss it or tell you that you should simply be more positive. What I want to say about it is this. The sickness is evidence of the realness of what you are hoping for. Only things that genuinely matter to a person can produce that quality of ache when they are delayed. And the things that genuinely matter, the things that carry the ache of their deferral, are almost always the things that I have placed in a person as deep desires that reflect their truest design. The longing for the restored relationship, the desire for the provision that allows for real security, the hope for the health that permits full engagement with life, the desire for the child, or the marriage, or the calling to be expressed, or the community to be found. These things produce the ache of deferral because they are real desires that point toward real goods. And real goods are worth hoping for even when the hope is costly. What I want to do with the heart sickness is not eliminate the caring. I do not want you to become indifferent to what you are hoping for as a strategy for managing the pain of the delay. Indifference is not the same as peace, and what looks like relief from the pain of hoping can actually be a kind of spiritual deadening that costs more than it saves. What I want to bring in place of the sickness is the deep tree-rooted confidence that what you are hoping for is in my hands, that my hands are capable and my intentions are good, and that the delay is not indifference, but precision. That confidence, when it takes root, does not eliminate the caring or the longing, but it removes the sickness from the caring. It allows you to continue hoping without the particular agony that comes from hoping without any anchor for the hope. That is what I am offering you in this conversation. Not the elimination of the longing, the anchoring of it. Let your hope be anchored to who I am, rather than to the speed of the visible response. Let it rest on my character, rather than on the circumstantial evidence of progress. And from that anchored place, hope fully and freely, and without the sickness that comes from hoping in a vacuum. Because you are not hoping in a vacuum. You are hoping in the presence of a God who has heard everything, who is working on everything, and who is moving toward the fulfillment of what you are hoping for, with the same commitment and the same love that have characterized every moment of your story from its beginning. One final thing before I close. I have spoken much today about completion, about what I'm finishing and bringing to its expression. But I want to make sure that what you take away from all of this is not primarily about the destination. The destination matters. The completion matters. What I am bringing matters enormously. But the walk toward it also matters. Every step of the journey has its own significance, its own gift, its own particular form of my presence and my work. And I do not want you to live the walk so focused on the destination that you miss what the walking itself holds. There is something in you right now, in this exact season of not yet, that is available to you that will not be available in exactly this form once the season has turned. The depth of dependence on me that this season has required, the quality of trust that has had to go bone deep rather than staying surface level, the intimacy of conversation with me that has developed because you needed that conversation in a way that easy seasons do not produce. These things are gifts of the current chapter. Receive them. They are real, and they are valuable, and they will serve you in the chapters ahead in ways that you cannot fully anticipate now. And as you receive them, know that the one who is present with you in the walk is also the one who has prepared the destination. Every step of the road is mine as much as the place where the road ends. And I'm in love with every step of it, because every step is a step taken with the person I love most in this story, you. Every step brings you closer to what I have planned, and every step is walked with someone who is not counting the distance with impatience but is walking it with the fullness of love that only I can offer. Step by faithful step, page by unfolding page, thread by carefully placed thread, all the way to the magnificent, glorious, completely realized ending that has always been waiting for you. Consider for a moment the athlete in the final stretch of a long race. Not a sprint, where everything is compressed into a few explosive seconds of full expenditure. A distance race, the kind that requires sustained effort over an extended period of time, that tests not just physical capacity but the quality of a person's relationship with difficulty and discomfort, and the impulse to slow down or stop altogether. In the early stages of a distance race, the novelty carries the runner. The excitement of the beginning, the energy of the crowd, the freshness of the body, all of these things contribute to a momentum that feels relatively natural. The middle miles are harder, because the novelty is worn off, and the body has begun to accumulate the cost of the effort, but the runner has enough forward momentum from the beginning to sustain them through the middle. And then there is the final stretch. The final stretch of a distance race is where everything is decided. Not in the dramatic moments of the finish line where the story ends, but in the unglamorous, demanding, costly stretch that comes just before the finish line is visible. The stretch where the body is at its most depleted, and the mind is doing the most negotiating, and the gap between what has been expended and what still remains to be covered feels, in the specific moment, almost insurmountable. This is where races are lost by people who had every physical capability to finish them. Not because they ran out of physical capacity, but because they ran out of the mental and spiritual conviction to keep going when going was most costly. This is also where races are won by people who might not have had the most talent at the start, who might not have had the best position in the early miles, who might have looked to an outside observer like long shots at any point in the middle of the race. Because the person who keeps their form when everything in them wants to collapse, the person who maintains their stride when the easiest thing in the world would be to slow down and give the body what it is asking for, that person discovers something remarkable in the final stretch. They discover that there was more in them than they thought, that the body, pushed past the point where it begged to stop, found reserves that were not accessible at lesser levels of demand, that the capacity they were not sure they had was there all along, waiting for the moment of sufficient need to surface. You are in the final stretch of something significant. I want you to hear that not as pressure, but as encouragement. The final stretch is still hard. It may even feel harder than what came before it, precisely because you have already given so much, and the accumulated cost of the effort is now fully present in your body and your spirit and your mind. But you are in the final stretch, not in the early miles where everything seemed possible, not in the grinding middle where the distance ahead seemed vast, in the final stretch, where the distance behind you is real and substantial, and the distance ahead, though it does not yet show you the finish line clearly, is less than what you have already covered. Run. That is what I am saying to you in the simplest terms, not in the sense of frantic or desperate activity, but in the sense of continuing to move forward with the same quality of intention and faithfulness that you have brought to the miles behind you. Not coasting because the end seems near. Running. Giving the final stretch the same quality of effort that the best stretches of the race received, because the final stretch is where the story of the race is ultimately written. How you run the end says everything about who you are and who you have become through the whole journey. How does a person run the final stretch well? Not by measuring every remaining step against some ideal pace that the weariness of the journey has made impossible to maintain. Not by looking at the other runners and comparing their position to yours, which takes your eyes off your own course and your own calling, and introduces a comparison that serves no useful purpose. Not by cataloging every ache and every expenditure and every place where the cost has been highest, which deepens the awareness of the cost rather than directing the energy toward the finish. A person runs the final stretch well by doing one essential thing: fixing their eyes on what lies ahead, on the one who is waiting at the finish, on the purpose that started the race, on the truth that the race goes somewhere and the somewhere is worth arriving at. Fix your eyes. That is the instruction. Not on what you can see right now, which may be uninspiring. Not on what the circumstances immediately around you are suggesting, which may be discouraging. Fix your eyes on what is true about who I am and what I have promised and where this story is going. That fixed gaze is what carries a person through the final stretch when nothing else will. Not talent, not natural capacity, not the support of favorable circumstances. The fixed gaze on the one who planned the course and set the finish line and is waiting there with everything prepared for the runner's arrival. There will be moments in the days ahead, because the final stretch is still a stretch and it has its moments of acute difficulty, when the weariness will be particularly acute, when the familiar heaviness will settle in with a weight that feels like it belongs to the early chapters of the journey rather than to the final stretch. On those days when the weariness says there is too far still to go, when the discouragement says the finish line may not be as close as you thought, when the old questions come back to be settled again, here is what I want you to do. Come back to what is permanent. Not to your feelings, which are real, but which fluctuate with the conditions of the race. Not to the visible circumstances, which change and shift and do not always accurately represent what is actually happening in the deeper story. Come back to what does not change. Come back to who I am, to the character I have shown you across the whole of your experience of me, to the faithfulness that has been consistent through every season, visible in different ways in different chapters but never absent, to the promises that were spoken over your life, not as conditional suggestions, but as declarations of my intention. Come back to those permanent things, and let them be your footing when the ground under your feet feels soft. My nature does not change with your circumstances. My commitment to you does not vary with how you are performing in a given stretch of the race. My love for you does not reduce when you are weary or increase when you are at your best. It is constant, utterly and reliably constant, and that constancy is what you can anchor to when everything else is in motion, when the situation is uncertain and the timeline is unclear and the encouragement of visible progress is scarce. The constancy of my character toward you is the thing that holds. Anchor to that. Come back to it as many times as you need to in the days ahead. Come back to it every morning if necessary, every afternoon if needed. It will not grow tired of receiving you. It will not eventually say, "You have come back too many times, find another anchor." It is always there, always solid, always enough. What does it look like to carry expectation well through the final stretch? Because there is a subtle but important difference between genuine living hope and the kind of anxious anticipation that drains rather than energizes. Genuine hope for what is ahead, the kind I want you to carry through the days between now and the moment when the answers begin to become clearly visible, is not a constant, anxious scanning of the horizon for signs of arrival. It is not checking and rechecking the circumstances for indications of movement. It is not holding your breath until something breaks. It is something quieter and more settled than any of those things. Genuine expectation, the kind rooted in real trust in who I am, is a posture rather than a feeling. It is the orientation of a person who has received a promise from a source they fully trust, and who, having received that promise, has released the need to manage its fulfillment. They live fully present to what is in front of them, because the future is in hands they trust and does not require their management. They bring their full attention to the current chapter, because the current chapter matters and is worth their full engagement. And underneath all of that full present engagement with what is current, they carry a settled confidence that what I have promised is on its way, that the story is moving toward the ending I have already written, and that their management of that process is neither required nor particularly useful. That is the posture I am inviting you into, not anxious scanning, not forced optimism, not the particular exhaustion of trying to feel more hopeful than your actual experience supports. Simply the settled orientation of someone who knows the author and trusts the story, who lives the current chapter fully because it matters, who holds the future loosely because it is in capable hands, who carries, beneath all the ordinary textures of daily life, a genuine and unforced confidence that the ending I have planned is real and good and coming. Let me move now toward the close of this long and significant conversation. I want to revisit the central truth that has been running through every part of what I have said to you today. The thread that connects every image and every section from the opening word to this one. That thread is this: what I began in you will be brought to completion. Everything I started, every good work planted, every gift deposited, every calling established, every promise spoken, every seed of purpose and potential and destiny that I laid down in the soil of your life, from before your beginning and through every season of your journey, all of it is moving toward its completion. Not eventual, someday, vaguely hopeful completion. Active, intentional, in motion, already in process completion. I do not begin things I do not intend to finish. This is not a wish or an aspiration of mine. It is my nature. And my nature expressed toward you looks like a faithfulness that does not know how to abandon what it has invested in. The story I am writing through your life, with all its complexity and its length and its difficulty, is a story I am fully committed to bringing to its glorious conclusion. Not because you have earned my continued investment through your perfection, because your perfection has never been the condition, but because I chose you, because I planted something in you that I am invested in seeing bear fruit. Because the love I have for you is not a seasonal love that varies with your performance. It is the fixed, constant, eternal love of the one who made you and called you, and has never once, through every chapter of your story, stopped working toward your good. The story is not at its end, not by a long way. The chapters ahead are filled with things I have been preparing to release into your life, answers that have been traveling toward you, changes that have been forming under the surface, turning points that are approaching even now from directions you cannot yet see. The completion I am working toward is not just the resolution of what has been most difficult. It is the full, expansive, glorious unfolding of everything I placed in you and everything I have planned for you. And that full unfolding is what the current chapter is making way for, not despite its difficulty, through it. So walk forward, step by step, day by day, trusting the author of your story with the parts of the narrative that are still being written, engaging fully with the chapter you are in, because it is a chapter worth engaging with, holding the future with open hands, with confidence rather than anxiety, with genuine expectation rather than desperate grasping, carrying these words as an anchor on the days when the race is hard and the finish line is not yet visible. Coming back to this conversation in the moments when the questions come back and the certainty wavers, and finding here the unchanging truth of who I am toward you. You are bearer of my promise, not because you have been perfect in the carrying of it, but because I placed it in you, and I have never stopped investing in its fulfillment. The promise is still alive. The promise is still in motion. The promise is being brought toward its completion by the one who made it, who has never broken a promise and will not start with yours. Walk forward in that truth. Walk forward in the confidence that the story is going somewhere extraordinary. Walk forward knowing that the author is right here, pen in hand, writing with as much love and intention and skill as ever. And the chapters that remain, the ones that will bring everything that has come before into its fullest possible meaning and its most glorious expression. Those chapters are the next ones. They are coming. They are being written even now. Amen. If this message spoke to something deep in you today, I want to hear about it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their story is not broken, that the author has not walked away, that what feels like an incomplete chapter is still being written by hands that know exactly what they are doing. Type Amen in the comments to receive this blessing over your life, and share this video with the person in your life who is in the middle of a hard chapter right now, who needs to hear that hard chapters are not the end of the story. Subscribe so you receive every message made with you in mind. Your testimony matters, and the story you are living is worth sharing.